Bye. So before we start, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Hannah MacDonald. I am in my third year at the entry-level doctorate program of occupational therapy at Boston University.
Nice. Oh, well, side note, I early decision to Boston University. Um,
Congratulations!
thank you.
Good
Um,
book.
so just to start off, so can you describe to us, biologically, what is autism and what are its symptoms?
Yeah, so I think the biological basis of autism isn't totally understood. There's no associated gene, no one totally understands it. So autism is a form of neurodivergence that affects the way that people see the world effectively. So there's like a lot of different ways that autism can present, but it frequently causes like special interests and restricted and repetitive behaviors, um lots of different like body movements that go into those restricted and repetitive behaviors. um it often causes some social issues, so difficulty with eye contact or difficulty understanding what people are wanting to talk about. It also can cause certain people to end up with like savant type syndromes because of their special interests. So they can become really, really smart in something totally like totally out there, like become really good at the piano or know everything there is to know about elevators. That's the kiddo I work with right now. She knows everything about elevators. um, but so there's just a lot of ways it can present. And I think for me, I've done a lot with kids with autism, and it's hard to kind of define it because it can present as like anything. Like there's no one clear autism or like a typical autism, because I think it can be anything.
Yeah.
I love that explanation. And just to clarify before we go on, can you define special interest and like provide a couple of examples of like the repetitive and restricted behaviors you're talking about?
Yeah, so repetitive and restricted behaviors are often like stims. So like doing something over and over again that makes you feel good to like fulfill a sensory need. So sometimes it's rocking back and forth. There was one girl that I knew that would like put her fingers really close to her eyes and wiggle them, which is super overstimulating if you try to do it. There's a lot of rocking. One of my kiddos right now walks back and forth and like bumps into the wall over and over again to get that like proprioceptive input. So that's kind of it, or the stims. Another example would be like verbal stims. So like making a noise over and over again because it satisfies your auditory needs. Um, and then special interests are areas, like one area of interest that someone might become really interested in. So I think I gave the example of elevators. I knew another kiddo whose special interest was fire extinguishers. So he had like 12 fire extinguishers in his house, would love to tell you everything there is to know about fire extinguishers. So it's just kind of like one thing that a person can really deep dive into.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, the fire extinguishers were really fun.
And so in addition to the restrictive behaviors and the special interests, autism has social implications. Do you think you could tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think it can kind of lead to more social unawareness. So difficulties perceiving what other people are interested in or how other people are responding to you, particularly with nonverbal cues. So like when someone starts to like get uncomfortable or like not make eye contact, I think that can be a little bit harder for people with autism often. Also eye contact is a big one. I know a lot of people with autism really struggle with making and maintaining eye contact during a conversation. Also, the affect that they speak with can be very flat sometimes, but it can also be not very flat because, like I said, like autism is literally anything. So it's a lot of these are commonly seen, but also the exact opposite can be true in someone with autism. And like, I just want to make that super clear that like it's not just bad eye contact and not understanding someone else's emotion. It can be so many things.
Yeah, that
Um,
makes
and
sense. There's like the word spectrum and autism spectrum disorder. That's
Yeah, like it absolutely is a spectrum, and like it's It's so many different things. So it's hard to like just like say the definition in general because it is literally anything. And I think me and Sajani have worked together at a summer camp with kids with autism and kids with disabilities in general. And I think we could both give plenty of examples of like, well, this kid couldn't make any eye contact, but then this kid made like so much eye contact. So like it's absolutely like it's everything. Like there's an example of a kid with everything.
So another like debate within like the neurodivergent community is autism a linear spectrum or a circular spectrum? And I've heard the pros and cons of both, but from what you've learned, which one do you think is more accurate?
So I personally I'm not diagnosed with autism. I'm not on the autism spectrum. So I don't think that that's necessarily my place to like have an opinion because I feel like there are so many autism advocates out there that can say like what they believe based on their personal experience. Um, I don't really think of autism as either. I think of autism as just like a very broad range of whatever, like the color chart that has all the colors on it and you can pick anywhere to, I think that's what I think of in my head. But also I respect whatever the autism community has voiced as their how they would prefer it.
I like that answer.
I love how you're leaving space for people with autism to advocate for themselves.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's such an interesting thing. Recently, like I follow all of these autistic creators on TikTok, and I've gotten to learn so much because I recently learned the autism community doesn't like to be called people with autism, like person first language. They like to be autistic. So like it's an autistic person, not a person with autism. So I think like that's where I've learned the most is just from like listening to autistic creators, and it's really awesome.
Yeah, I like that, or I like your insight into that specific topic. And at the beginning of the interview, you said that you like autism is a type of neurodivergence. So in your work, what are the biggest differences you see between autistic people and people like of other neurodivergency?
Um, I think autism is probably, for me at least, what I've seen the most broad of the types of neurodivergency because it just means so many things. Other types of neurodivergence are like ADHD or ADD, and I think those generally have a more organized group of symptoms, whereas autism is so broad in its presentation that it could mean anything to any person. And so I think it makes it a little bit more unique in that it is so encompassing of so many things and not just like a pinpoint diagnosis.
And as an occupational therapist, do you only work with autistic people, or what is the scope of your profession?
No, so I'm a student. So I'm still going through OT school. um, but a lot of OTs do work with autistic people and autistic children specifically. But OT in general works with everyone. So a lot of times OT in like hospital and acute settings work with people who have just suffered some sort of decline in their functional status. So who maybe experienced a recent illness and are now weaker, so they can't do the things that are important to them the way that they could otherwise. So OTs work with just about anyone in any setting. I think I learned about like this really cool one. There are OTs that work with incarcerated people. I think that's really cool. So it's not just autism.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that one was really cool.
So naturally, because autistic people are different from or make a small um section of our society, they face stigmas naturally. What are some common stigmas that you have seen in the people that you've or what are some common stigmas that affect people with autism and is there a way that we can be more inclusive as a society?
Yeah, so I think once again, I would defer to autistic creators for that question because I know they have very strong opinions about it, and I don't want to misspeak and represent the autistic community in a way that they wouldn't like. But I think honestly, the way that I kind of tried to define autism probably is a stereotype, right? Like I think the things a lot of people stereotypically think of autism are like maybe some social differences and poor eye contact and really smart and really good at math. So I think that's like a general, pretty broad view of a stereotype of autism. Um, and I think that that can harm autistic people. And I've seen lots of videos and heard lots of autistic people talk about how that's harmful, because when that they don't fit that mold or their autism presents in a different way, no one knows how to respond and almost blames them personally. But like I said, I totally defer to autistic content creators. I really love Paige Lyle on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. She's amazing, and she talks a ton about it.
I'll be sure to check her out.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I know. I've done a lot with autism, but I also like really want to respect the boundary and not speak for the community, since I'm on the periphery of it, but and I've done a lot of work with the autism community, but I'm certainly not an autistic person that has those personal experiences.
We will be interviewing an autistic person in the near future. So we'll be
Awesome.
all these questions and see their personal opinion on the subject.
Yeah, and like I said, like I have the opinion, I can see, I think almost in any way that a stigma affects anyone, it would be the same. Because there are a stereotype and like the bad eye contact, not understanding when someone's mad at you, like stuff like that, I think is the general stereotype. And then if you don't fit that stereotype, or if that's what people expect from you, it causes some, differences when you're talking to someone and then they judge or perceive you differently. But yeah, I think like any stigma.
Of course, I can't speak for an autistic person, but I can somewhat relate to someone telling you you're not this enough. Like there's no perfect way to be autistic, but if you go in with some sort of preconceived notion of how someone with autism is supposed to act, then you'll never truly understand the person. Like you can't tell them who to be. So I like the perspective on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
As a neurotypical person who's studying to work with people with autism and has worked with autistic people before, how do you think, in your experience, can neurotypical people be more inclusive of autistic people?
Oh, in so many ways. I've talked a ton about it, but listening to the autism community and hearing what they prefer, using their preferred vocabulary. And I know so many autistic creators have made recommendations of things that they would love if neurotypical people did to make them feel more included. And I think identifying and then following through on those recommendations would be amazing. I think in general, just being, as with any group of anyone, just being as open-minded as possible and being non-judgmental is super key. Not judging someone's behavior because you might not understand the underlying cause of that behavior, and just being patient with everyone you meet and understanding that there might be something different. Specifically autism. Right now I'm working in a hospital and I'm implementing sensory stations on every floor of the hospital. So stuff like that I think is awesome, because I know some people with autism have sensory difficulties. So yeah, just hearing what people want and acting on it.
A big lesson I'm getting out of this interview is just listen.
Yeah, there are so many people that are telling you what they want. And I think, as we've evolved as a society, we have social media now. And so everyone gets to say what they think and how they feel. So people that maybe didn't have as big of a voice before have this really big voice. So just listen to it and do what they're telling you. There are so many people with autism that are so clear in what they want, but it doesn't match what they're expected to want. So it doesn't happen. But if you just listen and act, then that's the best thing you can do.
I completely agree.
Thank you.
So, in your experience, I know you said that you implemented sensory stations in the hospitals, which is honestly amazing. Like, I love that idea, and I love how you're like bringing the resources that like autistic people said that they wanted to them. So, what other accommodations have you noticed that like would help autistic people and neurodivergent people thrive in their environments?
Oh, anything and everything you can imagine. Like I said earlier, autism means literally anything. So sensory strategies, both for sensory seekers and sensory avoiders. So I think a lot of times one of the other stereotypes would be like avoids loud noises, but sometimes kids or adults with autism like seek loud noises. So providing access to noise canceling headphones that maybe can play music or be noise canceling. Um, Understanding the broad range of sensory needs and trying to provide something that would help everyone. In one of my clinical placements for school, I did a presentation on adults with autism, and I talked about strategies in a therapy gym for both sensory seekers and sensory avoiders. And I got so specific about like the type of weights you use, like neoprene versus vinyl. Like it's anything you can think of would help the sensory needs. I think allowing more processing time when you're speaking. I think as a society in general, we speak very fast and expect people to answer us very fast. But sometimes there's a little bit of the delay in the processing. So just like giving that moment to think and being patient with the response. Um, Also, I think allowing more breaks would be really useful. I think we also like move really fast and we're really fast paced. So I know I've seen that in a lot of schools is like implementing like a break outside for a little bit, once an hour and stuff like that. Also in colleges, I know a really frequently used accommodation for people with for neurodivergent people is note taking apps and recording software so that you can listen to something more than once, so that if you are like in an overwhelming sensory environment and can't get the content of the lecture in that moment, then you can take like still have it accessible for when it is more accessible to you because the sensory environment is more managed.
I love what you said about one of the accommodations being like speaking slower. I think that's something that not only people with autism could benefit from, but also like our society in general, just like taking a step back and slowing down. What else can people do in everyday interactions with neurodivergent people or people with autism that would help both parties, honestly, understand and have like more meaningful interactions?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, as with any person, just lead with kindness and patience and understanding. I think people are really quick to judge as something weird or annoying or not typical, but if you just take a second to like be a little more patient with it and listen more, then I think that's it. I think when talking with a person with autism is the same as when talking with a stranger in general. Just like be patient and understanding and non-judgmental, because I think a big problem is how judgmental people can be really quick. And so I think if you slow down and you're not quite as judgmental when talking to someone with autism, then you'll be more accepting of whatever's happening, period. And that's the case with any communication.
I love that. I love how compassionate you are. That's always been one of my favorite things about you.
Oh.
We also have a couple questions just about your experience in general, like some of your favorite memories. So one is, what is your favorite aspect of working with special needs people? Like, why special needs?
Oh, I love disabilities in general. I love how every kid so I work with kids mostly, but there are adults too, lots of adults with disabilities. But I work mostly with kids. I love how every kid has their own unique, like, entire story and personality. I've learned about so many fun things that I definitely wouldn't know otherwise. Elevators, fire extinguishers, trains, airplanes. Like, I just have gotten to learn so much from so many kids. And knowing all of these kids with disabilities has helped me learn more about kind of people in general. And I think I've seen so many different characteristics come through that I have such like a broad range of experiences now that I love moving forward. I also love learning from people with disabilities. I think they have so much to teach me, and like I have learned so much from the kiddos that I get to hang out with that like I'm so lucky. So I just love like getting to learn and getting to be a part of their lives.
I love that.
No, me too. I've had some of my best experiences. Like I volunteer at a different special needs camp than you and Sajni. It's closer to my house. We drive like an hour to get a DreamWorks, but I've learned so much from like the kids there and just like letting loose and just like having fun with the kids, just watching them run around and like enjoy themselves is
Yeah,
awesome.
it's awesome. Like and like I've gotten to learn so much about cool things and like beyond special interest, like how to change a diaper of a big kid and how to even like protecting dignity is like I'm really big into protecting dignity. And I've carried that forward with my family and my grandmother, and like things like that are just so important to everyone, and I learned it because of a kid with special needs. So like I think that's amazing, and like it's shaped who I am as a person and helped me become more inclusive in general, and I just think that's awesome.
Yeah. Like volunteering with them, like especially at a camp, is just like stepping out of like a neurotypical person's comfort zone. Because normally like we wouldn't be in an environment where there's so many like neurodivergent people and like different like able-bodied, like different just like people on like the spectrum and like different disabilities, and like just being in that environment teaches you so many things like that like you'd never think, like so many situations that like you'd never picture yourself in, but you
Mhm.
always walk out with like a new experience or like a new lesson. And
Yeah.
honestly, it's amazing. I completely understand why you chose that profession.
Well, and I think what I always tell this story, there was a kiddo at camp who she couldn't walk or talk, so she was nonverbal and non-ambulatory. And one day I decided we had like a bounce house come out. I decided that she was gonna go in the bounce house. So I waited until like all the other kids were done, and I got like 8 volunteers, and like we like hoisted her into this bounce house. It was probably the most uncomfortable transfer I have ever done. Like that poor girl, like she had so many hands on her, and like we tried to sit her on the little step that goes in, and it sunk down because it's just filled with air. So it was like a whole conundrum. But she didn't complain the whole time. She was very vocal and very good at advocating for herself. But she did not. And then we got in the bounce house and she was so happy. Like she was just laughing and smiling so big and so bright. And she wasn't mad about the terrible transfer in because she wanted to do it. And so like I think that's been like a big experience that shaped me through, the special needs camp in general, has been like, even if it seems impossible, like just give every opportunity you can, because like she wanted to go in the bounce house and she was really happy to be in there. So, like that's in general too, like something that's really shaped my perspective is just like give every opportunity you can.
And she got to go in the bounce house.
She went in the bounce house and she was so happy. The pictures from it are so cute.
I'm so glad. And we have one last question prepared, which is, I know like that must be a core memory for you. Do you have a favorite memory with an autistic kid?
Oh man, I have so many. It's so hard to pick. Okay, well, this one I don't. Oh, okay, wait, I'll just pick a funny one because that makes me happy. That comes to mind quick. So I was a nanny for a sweet boy with autism. He was 6 and he was super naughty. And I was trying to do schoolwork with him, and we were outside and he was just running in circles away from me because he didn't want to do his schoolwork. And eventually I like started to get more frustrated and like used a sterner tone, which like I never use a stern tone. I'm sure Sajani can tell you. I'm never like the angry one. So I was like, okay, we really have to go. It's really time to do homework. And so he went, close your eyes. I have a surprise for you. And so I closed my eyes, and then he was like, open them. And he's holding their cat. I was obsessed with this family cat. He's holding this cat like under its arms and it's just dangling. And this cat looks so upset, but he was like, here's your surprise. And I just thought it was so funny because he knew I was getting frustrated with him. And so he decided to surprise me with the cat that he knew I loved.
Aw.
So, I think a lot of times autism too talks about like a social unawareness, but I think that was like very socially aware. Like he knew how to make me happy and get himself out of trouble. And then we did his schoolwork.
He gave you an
Um,
offer.
Yeah, he presented me with this cat that it was the poor cat looked so uncomfortable, but it was such a great cat that it was just letting it happen and it made it all better. So
Hanging on for dear life.
yeah, this poor cat, like the look on its face was so funny, but I was just so like amused with the whole situation. And I thought it was so sweet that he was like, well, she's getting mad, so I know what to do. Like track down the cat.
Honestly, the cat could solve all problems.
I think cats could solve every problem. So
And you got the work done, so win-win.
yeah, we got the schoolwork done and I got to pet the cat. So
I
but
love
yeah,
that.
that one always makes me chuckle because like such a smart boy to know like how to like totally distract me from my frustration and put off schoolwork for a few more minutes. Like just present me with a cat.
I love it.